What's up, future shred lords? Welcome back. Death of the Fingers. Got a great question again from the Twitters or X or whatever you want to call it. So Arpeggios, just a basic application and sort of the beginner's guide, if you will. And I mean, there's a million videos on there, so I decided to change it up ever so slightly to show you how to start using some of these simple and, you know, triad type arpeggios in a more sort of creative way so that you get a better appreciation about how to string them together that's not the obvious one. So it goes from sort of pretty straightforward primer into, okay, this is getting hard. But you know how it is. We just keep pouring it on, baby. No more yip yapping. Let's get into this lesson. All right, future shred lords, let's get into this first section here, which is just laying out the basics. So we're going to be working in the key of G major, 3rd fret, low E string, right? So I've got this scale, right? I can keep going. So I get like the whole fretboard there as far as the Ionian position is concerned, because now I'm also jumping up to do the 3 notes per string system alongside the classical position. Right, so that's a great exercise to help break down the fretboard. And once I get that far, I've chosen the key. Now what I want to do is to start to get myself primed for these arpeggios. Arpeggios are the notes of a chord played one at a time, right? So I've got a whole bunch of chords here. I've got the E type from Cage. I got that G type. Notice they're starting off the same note. I jump up here a whole step down from this A here, 12th fret, so I'm on the 10th on the A string now. I can play the C type. Right, if I do this jumping up an octave, I can do the D type, right? And notice the D and the C basically use the same little triad at the top, right? So that kind of information can be incredibly powerful when you're starting to get into these arpeggios, because you'll be like, okay, I see how this little piece of information actually builds out much more. You're going to take this piece of information and do something with it. So if you don't know that, what exactly is you expecting to do when you're not just taking a stab in the dark? Food for thought, right? So now we've got that down. We got the scale. Or maybe 3 notes per string. And then we've got the chord. And I'm going to use those things essentially interchangeably to flesh out the rest of the idea of the arpeggio. So now I don't want to play them all obviously as a big chord, so I'm just going to scale it down, right? So that's going to be 1, 3, and 5. Now in this case, notice I'm using this configuration with the G. Instead of playing it open, I'm going to move that note up onto the A string here, 5th fret. So that's going to be 3, 2 on the A, and then 5. So 3 on the low E string, 2, and 5 on the A string, right? So that gives me major. Of course, I can lower that bad boy to get the minor. 1 flat 3, 5. Then I can lower the 5th to get diminished. So now I've covered all the bases, right? So first I chose a key. These are the available notes. This is the first note, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and back to the root again. That's the Ionian position, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian, and the major scale or Ionian again. And of course, Aeolian is also known as the minor scale. I know that's pretty basic stuff, right? And so when I'm talking about triads, I want to basically choose every other note in the scale. So if I'm starting on 1, it's 1, 3, and 5. If I go to 2, it's 2, 4, 6, right? And then it's 3, 5, 7, and so on and so forth. And that's how you get these triads. And then you start to realize, oh, okay, all I'm doing is taking this major triad and lowering the 3rd to get the minor, and of course lowering the 3rd and the 5th to get diminished. That right there was just me taking, 3 minutes, not even 2 probably, to just rip through this stuff to basically get you up to speed on the basic theory of triads, because this is it's gonna matter later on, the scale degrees and the one you're supposed to play. And of course, that's the next thing is when do you use major triads, when do you use minor triads, and when do you use the diminished? Okay, well, before we get into that, because I want to do all these examples here on this first section on the high E and B string, we need to get up there, right? So we have this note, there's G, I'm jumping over the A, there's another G, and of course, jumping up onto the B string, there's another G, right? Of course, 2 holes, there's a B, jumping down, there's A, jump down another whole step, there's G. G we already know from the 3rd fret, of course, and then just using some simple octaves theory there gives me the next one. And of course, that's going to be very, very useful because now I can string this little G minor or G major triad here into 3 spots. And now automatically I know when I'm playing here, that's going to be chord number 1 of the actual sort of like scale degrees, right? Moving down, it's got to be diminished. That's 7, right? Minor for 6, major for 5, right? And there's 4, of course. That's another major. Moving back up to 1 here. Major, of course, going to 2. That's going to be minor, right? 3's minor. 4. Notice. Nails it, right? Major, of course. 5 again. Then 6. I can barely see here. There's 7, of course. Then I'm back to the root, but I'll play it down here. Okay, so that right there is what I would call ground zero. First, just taking the key, grabbing a chord, because the triad will look differently when you start to mess with where it starts and stuff on the 1st, the 3rd, and the 5th. Those are called inversions. But after I get the chord, I'm like, okay, I want the 1st notes, I want the 3rd note, and I want the 5th notes. And in this chord here, I have 1, 5, 1, 3. So if I took this note and did octaves, again, there's my 3rd. 1, 5, 3, and then 1, 5, 3 to the next one, 1, 5, 3. And that's just based off the 3 octaves theory, right? This guy, and this one. Very standard stuff there. Now, once I get there, what I want to do is essentially build out from that diatonically, right? So, of course, I'm like, here's 1. If I go up, it's 2. If I go down, and it's 1 again, right? Those are the ones next to it, of course, moving down 6, and then 5, and then 4. And we just did the whole process. So that's moving through each step of the scale diatonically using the 1st degree, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th as basically the starting positions. And of course you have to know that there's 1 half step down, that's 7, going up a whole steps, 2, up another whole step, 3, half step, 4, whole step, 5, whole step, 6, whole step, 7. Ooh, I've got to take a breath there and then back to a half step to get back to the root or 1. Now, I know I'm really ripping through this, but that's incredibly important. And so, you know, that essentially gets the table set now to do the more complex one, because we're going to take that small arpeggio chunk and convert it into triad arpeggios across 6 strings. No need for any more yip-yapping. I think I'm out of breath anyways. I need to take a drink of water. So let's get into this next section. All right, shred sexies. Now we got the basics down with this 3 octaves theory, right? And of course, diatonicism, right? Where there's diminished from 7, there's 6, minor, major, so on and so forth. We've understood all of those basic principles. Now what I want to do is take this little arpeggio and apply it across 6 strings. And not in a way where I'm always playing the same arpeggio, right? So in this case, I'm going to take this note B and move it up to the 7th fret on the low E string. So I have 2 notes now. That's 3 and 7, and then 5 on the A, right? So that's 1, 3, 5. And then, of course, it's 1, 3, 5. I know, 1, 3, 5. And then, of course, 1. One more time. Here, you know, that's 5, 3, 1, 5, 3, 1, 5, 3, 1. So you're starting to see I'm basically playing the exact same notes every single time. I'm just moving it to a different position and just playing the exact same notes. And same thing here, right? There's 1, there's 5, right? And then, of course, 3, 1. Again, I'm not going to sort of embarrass myself by trying to say them and do it at the same time because I'll fail. It is what it is, but these inversions are incredibly important, okay? And we're going to use a couple of them essentially for the next section of this little lesson here, but that part right there is very important. Make sure you spend some time just messing around with that. There's a million videos on triad arpeggios and inversions. Go check them out, and when you're ready, just start messing around with them. Of course, converting the arpeggios, right? There's 1, 3, 5, so that's 1, flat, 3, 5, right? That kind of idea. And then it's 1, flat, 3, flat 5 now. To get diminished again, and then you're just going to apply that across strict strings. So you get for the major, then of course minor, diminish. Now, I'm not going to bother coming down because I almost never do that in the triad arpeggio. Again, it's a fail situation. I'm too lazy to do this video twice. So that right there is important, of course. Then just apply diatonicism, and it's also excellent practice for you to be going, there's 1, flat 3, 5, 1, flat 3, 5, 1, flat 3. Burning those intervals into your brain is going to be incredibly useful later on when you get a lot better. Not doing it now means you're going to have to do it then, and it sucks. Trust me, don't do that. Don't make my mistakes. So then what you want to do is now just start to string them together in a diatonic series, right? So that's just me moving up each step of the scale, right? Close enough, right? Again, down here. You can start with diminished there if you're feeling like doing it way up high like that is really killing you. Just stop at the 12th fret and then come back down. You're getting essentially the same practice value out of it. But again, you're going to run into a situation where you get tunnel vision very bad. So what I like to do is create a loop. So I might start on 1 here. Go to 2. Down to diminish. And now you're actually getting some real music value out of it, because it sounds like that arpeggio sequence has like a little circuit, a little journey. And that right there is the magic. And if I want to kick it up another notch, what I'm going to do is, instead of playing them diatonically, what I'm going to do is create a chord progression. And the obvious one here is a 1-4-5. That's one everybody uses. And you can start expanding them out on like a 2-5-6-1 and a whole bunch of other ones. So I'll leave it up to you to just look at some chord progressions and be like, I can turn that into an arpeggio sequence. And then all of a sudden you're off to the races. Crazy times. Go watch my video on Hotel California, how to play them as arpeggios, if you want to see how that works. But now what I want to do is just, again, the 1-4-5 sequence. So here's 1. And 4 is here, so I'm going to know that that's going to be this one here. See, 5, 1, 3. That's why I knew it was going to be this second inversion, because the 1 is on this string, right? So I've got this sequence, moving up a whole step. Then I'm into the first inversion, which is also the same as the root here, right? So that's major again. Moving up. There's 4, that was 1. There's the 4 chord, there's the 5 chord, and there's the 1 again, right? And of course I'm moving up. 4, 5. Okay, so that was me just blistering through it, but you start to get the idea of how you can use these now as a chord sequence, a 1-4-5 in this case, to really maximize everything. And you're like, okay, I'm starting with this shape that happens in Ionian. Then I'm moving into the Mixolydian shape, right? I shouldn't try talking, do this. And then, of course, back into Phrygian. Then your Phrygian, that's straight up Lydian. Another one, Mixolydian then, of course. And now I'm into the Mixolydian position again, essentially by swapping them. And you're like, oh, look, I have 2 arpeggios that happen at the same place. You're like, that's a 5-1 chord progression. And then you're like, okay. And that's doing the fancier ones, right? Where I use dominant 7. Or you could do the dominant 7 and then just a major, right? Done, right? So there's lots of stuff to go through there. I know I'm just kind of blistering through this, but that's just the way it goes with these lessons. Don't worry about being perfect either. You're going to make mistakes and all the rest of that stuff. Just don't get self-conscious about it. You're going to screw up when you're playing, when you're practicing, when you're performing. So just deal with it and move on. It's not the end of the world. Just keep practicing towards not making many mistakes. So those ideas right there are going to be incredibly useful. Ascending diatonically. Then doing a sequence, if you will. into doing 1-4-5s. In this case, I'll start here on the first inversion. Okay, so that's another great one, and I get all the inversions and all the arpeggios stacked together in one big juicy lesson. Tell me that's not killer. Let's look at this last section where we switch up the chord progression to a 2-5-1. Nastiness. Let's do it. All right, Shred Sexies, as far as this last section is concerned, some of you might want to skip it because it's going to get a lot more advanced and you may not be super comfortable with that, but all the same, this is incredibly important information. So after you get good at these basic triad shapes, you know, you're sort of ascending diatonically, maybe going into a circle. So you get that done. What you want to do is evolve those triads into the dominant 7 versions, right? You got major 7 here like this. In the same position, I've got minor 7. Down a half step here, I get dominant 7. And then I also get minor 7 flat 5. Right, so that's the 4 flavors that you have with dominant 7 chord family. And then what you want to do is then apply the same principles. Instead of doing a 1-4-5 chord progression, you're going to do a 2-5-7. Right, and then what we're going to do is at the end, we'll substitute in a diminished arpeggio for the 2 chord instead of the normal minor 7, because we can use superimposition in that case, just borrow this diminished from another key. Done. So obviously I want to move to the second note of the G major scale, A, and I want to play a minor 7. Maybe I want to superimpose the D7 right over top of that right there in the Dorian position, and then of course down into the root again, right? Move to a different inversion of the A minor 7. This one. There's dominant 7 now. And there's major in the third inversion, right? Move it up again. Be like, okay, well, if I got this one here, I can be doing this major version. Over the IO inversion, there's... And then, of course, the first note of the triad, right? So in this case, it's going to be the first inversion, but of G major 7, right? And that right there is very, very, very useful to sort of find them and layer them over top of each other. And honestly, incredibly important for superimposition, but also just for training your mind that you can play like 50 things in the same spot. That's a huge breakthrough in the music world and the guitar stuff. Once you get there, you're like, oh man, I have so many more choices. And once you start recognizing them, that's an incredibly powerful soloing tool and improvisation tool. And people are just going to be blown away by your solos. That's the magic right there. It's not the speed. It's not the chops or the tapping or super flashy licks. If you watch the best guys that get the most views, that's what they do. They have the ability to blend a whole bunch of stuff in the same spot and make it sound absolutely delish. So, done. Right? And then, of course, the superimposition part, I'm going to take this minor 7 now. Swap in minor 7 flat 5. Maybe jump down to this one now, the dominant 7. And then ascend in 1. Right? And I can do the same thing. I'm up here. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that, but I can't help it. My brain's just like, yeah, that will sound cool. I can't stop myself. I'm like, you're supposed to keep it simple there, dopey. So again, if you're thinking about this one, it's Dorian. Then, of course, that's based off this 4th degree Lydian, and then, of course, jumping down to the 3rd Phrygian and playing the major 7. Right there, that's a monster-sized exercise kind of thing, and you can start to get even more psycho with it, of course, but we won't take it to an extreme. Essentially, you know, the next one would be down here, right? Then, of course, so on and so forth. So there it is. We basically covered everything that you need to know from a basics perspective, from the 3 octaves one using diatonicism with respect to each one of those now on just one string or a set of strings to grade, then moving them up now to basically go across 6 strings. Same idea, using the diatonic scale to ascend. Then evolving that idea to be like I need to do a circuit, but still using diatonic scales. And then, of course, doing the 1-4-5 chord progression next, where you're basically getting out of the idea of looping them like that diatonically, instead borrowing or using a sequence of chords. In this case, 1, 4. I was going to do that other note there, but I was like, don't. And then I was like, do it. And then, whatever, shoot me later. Right. And then, of course, after you get done that, you're ready to evolve them up to the next level where you're going to do the exact same thing, use a chord progression, but now with the dominant 7 version. So in this case, let's do this one here. We've got this. Then I'm going to come back down. And realistically, I should have done it with the minor there, right? So I need to find the A minor, essentially moving from here, moving to here. That's going to be this one here, superimposed again over the minor pentatonic, right? That's going to be 5. And then into 1. Okay, so right there is basically the most important information you need to know, and then it's just a question of practicing the living hell out of them so you get faster, more confident, and everything else. And of course, yes, you can break them down again and start to do them in groups of 3. So on and so forth, right? Another great way of recycling that information, get even more of a hardcore workout. And of course, just take baby steps. This stuff is not meant to be assimilated in 6 months or 2 years. It takes a lifetime to really start to put the stuff together and whatnot. And really, when you do that, you get into these Barnsby arpeggios, you know, where you're sort of like ascending in a whole bunch of shapes. Right? And once you do that, now all of a sudden you have this big, huge monster one. Or you can do Gambales too, which is another very famous one, of course. Right, it's basically 4 small arpeggios that you're going to put all together, right? So that's where the nature of these bigger, more complex arpeggio shapes come from. You evolving up the 2-string ones to 3 strings maybe, and then moving to 6 strings, of course. And you're like, how do I do that? You're like, okay, it's the D type. Right? And you're going to be like, and you're going to move to minor next one, right? And of course you're like, there's this chord, right? Then I'm moving up to this one here. And then I'm moving up again. And then, of course, major again. There's 4, there's 5, and so on and so forth until you get to diminished. I'll let you figure that one out for yourself. Again, using this idea of being like, okay, there's 1, 3, 5, 1, flat 3, 5, and 1, flat 3, flat 5 kind of deal. And again, all of those steps that I'm sort of throwing in at the end here, that is what makes you killer as a musician. Not just sitting there practicing repetitively a bunch of scale shapes and all the rest of that stuff. Use your mind. You'd be surprised at what you can accomplish and how you can overcome some pretty simple obstacles with respect to how you're expressing yourself on the instrument. And it's important, right? Instead of just sitting here, I'm in B minor. You're like, that sounds great. And then you might be like, okay, why not factor in that arpeggio? Dominant 7 there, and then see what I mean? Once you add a few more elements with respect to these arpeggios, and you don't have to make it super crazy difficult and then be like, what's the order? You're like, maybe I should start with this minor 7. into the dominant set for a tension release, and then into the minor set, or the minor pentatonic ending. Now all of a sudden, you've taken all the elements and put them together. You've got tension release, you've got a little bit of a circuit happen, you've got multiple different sounds sort of working in conjunction to create a much bigger and more satisfying musical idea. I hope this helped in some way, shape, or form. Of course, there's millions more videos on arpeggios out there. Check them all out. Don't be shy to get another opinion. Get as many opinions as you can, as many practice ideas as you can. Even if you're watching the same information again and again and again, I've done it. It helps. Trust me, it just pounds it right in there. You just got a bit of an iron spine to be like, oh great, going through this again, but do it anyways. Believe you me, it pays off in the end. Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single one of you. And good luck on your practice sessions and factor those arpeggios in now. See you in the next one.